2017 Duvall City Council Committee of the Whole. On the agenda tonight is good of the order and year in review by Mayor Ivershock. Does anyone have, any council member have anything for good of the order? All right, with that, I'd like to welcome Mayor Ivershock to his final year in review. So this makes it what, 12 or 15 total? 12
Well, and over 400 council meetings and probably 800 workshops. All for fun. So this presentation's got some sizzle, some snap, and hopefully a few laughs. Okay, so we're going to start off with the sizzle first. You guys ready? Matt Morton did this. Yes. So every year I do a presentation, and last week the community and the council thanked me, and I want to today take the time to thank you. So I've handwritten notes for all of you. Actually, you can say thank Kristen, my fiancée, for writing the notes, because her writing is so much better than mine. And so, but I also have a gift for all of you as well, as I hope you will like that. But the biggest thing about it is we work so hard throughout the year, and now we get a chance to actually take a look at what we did throughout the year. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about projects that we did, events that we participated in, things that we did, some future projects and highlights by each department, and then we're going to talk about the team, which starts with the council members, the city departments, and then changes to the team. We've got 2 new council members coming on board, we've got a new mayor, and we've got some really fun things planned down the road. So my personal favorite project was something that I really wanted to see happen for the last 10 years, was the Big Rock Ball Field. And so we started off many years ago, if you remember, with just this piece and this nice swampy area over here that we call the pond. And it changed and transformed with the little, where we all dug the shovel in and went for it, to what you see today. That's my favorite photo about a park and what it's transformed into as a community. The second big project that we finished up this year was Main Street. Again, we always love the good shovel photo, and it is transformed into what we now see as a connectivity for our entire north-south portion of this town. And then future administration, future council members can then plan on the east-west portions of it as development goes. The other one, which is not as fun and not as sexy, but to Boyd it's very, very close to the heart, is a Parkwood retrofit, because that was a really interesting area right in a neighborhood trying to take a very, very old pond, and turn it into something that was much better, much cleaner for the environment.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty sexy.
So that would be your snack that you have there. Okay. And then key things that we did, if you think about all these things that we took on the comprehensive plan amendment, we took on the park impact fee discussion, we took on a transportation plan update, we took on a stormwater plan update, we took on a sensitive areas policy update, and we took about a Walden Community Park planning meeting that took place last night. So a lot of things that went on, as well as a lot of community events. This happens to be the Art and Wine Walk that's going on in town, and this is a local group that played in the visitor center, which has turned out to be more of a community center now than a visitor center. So it's really neat to see how this whole facility down there has morphed since 2013, when we all said, hey, we're going to turn a centennial year that year, turn the big one 100. Let's come up with some use for that building. Now it's just transformed into something beyond what all of us could envision it to be. And then, of course, we wouldn't have life without cake and Arbor Day, where we all get to participate, hug a tree, buy a tree, even visit different events, and if you really want to, you can get your own rain barrel. Big hits. I know Mr. Walker has at least one of these, which are very good. And Rivers have one. So with that, of course, the big event, Duvall Days, I always auction myself off every year, and so in this case, these 2 young kids they're actually called the Love Family, L-O-V-E, and so they were the winners for the recipients of the mayor for the day. And just look at the crowds, look how many people show up for our community event every year. It's just one little downtown event, but see how it transforms. And of course, wouldn't be complete without the giraffe. It says I love Duvall on it. So. and wouldn't be complete without the occasional fireworks show, which is always neat to see how we start with an idea and how that idea morphs into something else, then transforms into something bigger when other groups and community entities start to take charge of this. The other one, of course, is one that's been going on for many, many years, has outlived my administration, outlived Ms. Nixon's administration, is Summer Stage. It's something that just continues to go. This is, of course, Danny has to relive the piano drop. This is a cardboard version of the piano drop.
The piano float.
Yes, which you used a drone for, no less. But it still was a neat event to see all these people show up for all these great events and activities that come out every year. And each band is totally unique and different each year. And on top of that, it brings in a different crowd every year. And I think we got somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people that showed up. And Rotary does a phenomenal job with the beer and wine. It was a big hit as well. So part of what we did to change things up a little bit this year is we wanted to reach out to the community. So we put on a series of town halls. We did 2 of them. One on, if you remember, growth and annexation, the other one on transportation. Planning department took one and the public works department took the other. And it was really neat to see how they were able to engage the community. In this case, if you look back here, you've got a couple of planning commissioners just engaging on it. It was neat to see them taking ownership of this as we evolved this plan out, and how the crowd turned out, and then how interactive the whole evening was, and how it was neat to be able to see that. And the best part, of course, was seeing the county representative and 2 state representatives show up on the transportation one to talk about how it really is a regional issue as we go. Okay. Future projects, big one on the board, of course, is the discussion about what to do with the restroom at the Big Rock ball fields. And of course, another one is going to be the whole project of Toll Brothers. If you've gone up and down Big Rock Road, you've seen it cleared on both sides of the road. That project is now started. It's going to have a roundabout. I'm sorry, my Google Meet doesn't work. So a roundabout in here that's coming in as part of the phasing of it. And then with that, of course, there's going to be improvements along the main drag of 275th in town. And we've got 2 roundabouts being discussed, one here, and then of course the big one down here off 152nd. That's the big one that's under discussion. Again, these are just ideas that have been floated by. And then the last one, of course, is a big one, which isn't really seen by many people, is a water line. This is a huge feeder to the city that is really dilapidated, needs to be improved. And as you can see, this is the big line coming through here. This is the secondary resource that we get our water from. It's not working right now, as I understand. But it's something that if we want to have a backup supply system, we need to consider what we would do with that. And then, of course, we've had lots of discussions with Toll Brothers about the park and what that looks like and how that will transform that whole area of the community with the elementary school going in, which I still wish it would be out in middle school, to the interactive activities that go on with it in the park and how it will be maintained and developed and all that. It's always neat to be able to see that. And then the other part, which is planning for the future, which is really going to be crafted by all the people that are in this room tonight, is updating the tree policy, working on the park trails and open space. What does that mean to this community now? 10 years later, the people that worked on it back then, many of them don't live in town anymore. So there's a whole new, younger group of people coming in that are saying, our parks need to do this, or our open space needs to be that. This would be a chance to really revamp that, because there's money in the budget to be able to engage that dialogue, both from the community's perspective as well as internally. And then, of course, the not-so-sexy ones, unless you're Matthew Iyer, is finalizing the stormwater and ADA plans and the wastewater treatment plan and capital improvement plan to look at what that looks like and where we go with that. Because that treatment plan is now, 12, 13 years old now, Boyd?
About that,
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see what that happens. So what I want to talk about is the kind of the city departments and where they go, and then I've got some stories I want to share along the way as we have this, and I've got a couple of fun things to pass out. But the biggest thing about the departments is that we all work together as a team. And PJ's seen this because he obviously gets the pleasure of going to 2 city staff meetings.
Beautiful.
He fed him a little Kool-Aid before he got here. But and PJ can certainly, and so can everybody else in the room, is that we debate, we disagree, but we respect each other when we walk out that door. Door may be closed and may be really interested in, and Amy will certainly get to experience this next year as we warm up to you. You're a little more animated once they warm up to you. Though you'll see how the disagreeing exists, but the fact there's a mutual respect in the room. And the biggest one is they keep focusing on what Duvall would be as a great city. There's never a question about, hey, this is my project or that project, it's the city's project. It's the city's pieces that we're working on together. And it's really fun to see how each department will engage that part of it. And big pieces, of course, is what they do for different activities. In this case, these are the different department head pumpkins, if you hadn't been in City Hall for Halloween to see that, but they're really neat. I'm sure Diane, from an artistic perspective, you would appreciate the creativity that goes into this. Especially when you're talking about a bunch of engineers and working through it, or some planners, thinking about what they're going to do. I'm hoping that in the future, IT will actually put together a pumpkin PJ.
Yeah, let's see, it'll be virtual.
Oh, we started. I'll make a working computer.
Yeah, that's right, as you will. So, Matt is not here, but I had each department create one slide. Of course, the police department, who usually follows the rules, had two. So they broke the rules a little bit, but I'm sure that there's a lot of great data and information we'll share. But the biggest thing is talked about the inclusion component of wanting to be as inclusive within the city as possible and bringing that professionalism, the day-to-day components with what we do. And then, of course, partnering within the community itself. Matt has done a fabulous job with reaching out to the chamber, the DCC, other organizations in town to say, okay, this is where we are at, this is where we want to go, help us get there together collectively. And so Matt's done a great job with that. And of course, finding efficiencies and mapping out what the future will look like, and that'll happen next year as the new council sits down and spends a whole day together and put together a retreat. What does that look like? How does that focus on what we want to do? And then, of course, bring in new sources of revenue, because cities cannot live on development, cannot live on what currently you have. You've got to think outside the box. And a lot of cities in this state, believe it or not, their -- sales tax, and Duvall is not excluded from this, is not brick and mortar inside their city anymore. It has to do with online purchases. And believe it or not, one of the biggest ones a lot of cities have is leased cars. You get sales tax and continually monthly taxes from a lot of that, and that brings in a lot of revenue. So it's really interesting. What you would think that would keep cities alive way back when is now very different than what keeps cities alive today. And so that will be part of what Matt is charged with as it goes. The police department, again, continuously evolves and grows. It's really neat to be able to see these new officers come on. Everybody's had a chance to meet Officer Fisher. She has now made it through her FTO as of last week. And then at the end of the month, we'll have the last two officers through their FTO program. And so we'll have a great force out there to be able to work with. They have obviously completed a whole level of service study and really looked at what that looks like within each department. And that's the realignment we had with the two sergeants kind of doing different tasks to now becoming lieutenants that are having focused components to what they do. And then, of course, the culture within the department really focused really intensely on the community outreach component of it, really saying to them, this is where we want to be, this is what we want to do. And if you notice, the police department's Facebook page is constantly being updated and engaged. Still has more followers than the city's Facebook page, but we won't comment on that one. And so the big one, of course, was the school resource officer that got implemented. Of course, I hope you've all had a chance to meet our distinguished officer up there. And what's really neat about it is that these students know him, and he's been so proactive with so many conversations that a lot of the issues that would percolate up to the top, that would create something we'd have to respond to, have been able to be resolved because we've been able to hit it before it boils. And it's really neat to be able to see that because they can gauge the perspective of what's going on. It's not just at Cedar Crest, but also the strong engagement at Eagle Rock as well as Cherry Valley. And if you walk into Cherry Valley on any given day, you'll notice that there's an officer in there from time to time checking in. And of course, the DARE program now expanded to include Stillwater. They were actually going to pay for the supplies and all that, and really wanted to see that happen, and so we worked with King County to make that happen. And of course, they met all their mandated training. They recruited 3 new officers, which I'm hoping all of you have had a chance to meet. If not, we'll continue to meet. And then, of course, their fiscal responsibility, living within their budget means for what they've got and what they can do. With that, they really kept, as we talked about the school presence, we talked about the city partnerships. They're really partnering really well with King County and, of course, the school district's the biggest one, because they are basically represent not just the city of Duvall, but the surrounding areas to that. And then, of course, they've effectively responded to community needs. You see that a lot of what goes on. HOA meetings now, you'll oftentimes see an invite sent out to the police department as well as a lot of the other city departments to come in and share ideas and what goes on. As you can tell, they've obviously done that through the crosswalk enhancements, distracted driving, speed enforcement, and of course, the social media engagement. I think they have almost 10,000 followers now on their Facebook page. And then, of course, we talked a lot about the non-lethal force. The new shotguns with the beanbags now is a great way to be able to respond to certain situations that come up. The finance department, big changes in the finance department. I had to cut out a few of your lines, Lindsay, go along slide. So they did a lot of big things to come up, a lot of things related to looking at how we can be more engaging with the community. And you'll see that as we go into some of the issues around the utility billing component of it, especially increase the number of people that are using the online billing payment system, as well as decreasing past due notifications. And that, a lot of that had to do with Lindsay coming in from another city, entirely different process, learning an entirely new format, and coming up to speed as fast as you did. I'm really impressed with that, so thank you for that. And then, obviously, a lot of increased training within the finance department, a lot of different things that have gone on with that. Public Works, the biggest thing about Public Works is the things they do are things we don't want to think about. We don't want to have to worry about when we flush our toilet, where it's going or what's going to happen with it. We don't want to know when we turn on the water, we know the water is there. When we flip the electricity, we want to make sure the PSC's got lines that work to our houses. Things that we take for granted are things that they're constantly doing behind the scenes. Police, they're very forward, very engaging, but Public Works, a lot of things they do are behind the scenes. So things they do are building relationships with different community groups, and more importantly, the elected officials. Got 2 new people coming on board, and when you see the breadth and depth of all the things that Public Works does, it's really interesting to see where it all goes. So the day-to-day operations ranges everything from the water sewers, to the parks, to the fun events, to, most importantly, being responsive with the different requests that come into the building department every day. And then the construction projects, but not last but least, all the programs, things that they did on. You did the transportation town hall meeting. You're really able to bring a lot of people engaged in that discussion. And of course, you've got the wastewater capital improvement plan. That's going to be a big one for next year, because our treatment plant used to be the biggest cutting edge thing 12, 13 years ago, and now it's what some people are thinking, well, that's kind of old. What's the new thing? What's the latest thing? And so obviously processing water and the quality of those requirements continue to escalate every year. So looking at what that need will develop as we go. Okay? So planning department, of course, had a very slow year this year with the 2.5 people in that department. They completed the comprehensive plan amendment. They also worked on the shoreline master plan, the sensitive areas, which is a big piece of it, received their first non-residential building permit in 10 years. We haven't seen a commercial new project come online in quite some time. We finally got that, and now we've got a couple others that are coming online as well, so it's really neat to be able to see that. And then, of course, process several residential projects. And when you're talking residential projects, it used to be 10, 12, 15, 20 units. Now it's much larger than that. And so it's really interesting to see how the building community, instead of small mom and pops building houses nowadays, it's more larger than conglomerates building houses nowadays. And so it takes a much more sophisticated process to be able to handle some of these things, because it's not just putting a house on this lot, it's putting a house in this open space area. What does that mean to the neighborhoods and the community engagement portions of it, not just to save from the utilities to the roads and everything else. And then, of course, did a great job of community engagement with the annexation of Grove Town Hall that Laura and her team led. And then the Walden Community Park planning process has been really interesting to see. Instead of just saying, hey, council, what do you think of this park? We're going to put it in. It's now a community engagement discussion that really predicates and tees up for the opportunities around the parks, trails, and open space to see how you want to work that. And of course, the increased number of joint meetings between Planning Commission and Council, because, believe it or not, a lot of our council members are coming from where again, man? Planning Commission. So it's really neat to see all that happening. The city clerk's office had another slow year. They only processed 25,000 payments. And the biggest one, of course, was public records requests. We saw a huge influx of those. It wasn't, if you think about it, just one request can send you down a 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 hour process. And so we've got 70 of those that came in. And then, of course, we had a whole policy around our public disclosure requests and what to do with retentions of records and how to process things. And you think about it, those are all things we take for granted, but the clerk's office does a lot of that behind the scenes. And then the tree lighting, of course, is something that the clerk's office loves to do, has been doing it for every year, as well as a couple of other smaller events, which is the gift-giving tree at City Hall. If you haven't come by to pick up an ornament, that would be great to do that. And of course, the Big Tree Boy Scout tree recycling event. And then the special collection event, where we got a little bit of material this year, only 58,000 pounds. So it's a huge event. It's a great way to the community to get rid of stuff that could just be sitting in their garage, that could be leaking into the stormwater, heaven forbid, that would have to void. And then it gives a way for people to offset some of these stuff, and for a way to us to engage the community with different mailings and messages and et cetera that we pass out. Okay, IT, we couldn't forget about IT, PJ. So the core switch replacement, that was a small project, if I remember right. It only took a couple of hours to work that one through.
Yeah.
The firewall replacement, that was another small one, right, Andy?
Sure.
I'm sorry, these calls, do you have to seek your therapist after looking at this? But the police department conference room modifications, that was a big one for them, you know, but that was a big deal to them. And of course, the other one was the whole copier. Remember that challenge that went into what we were gonna do to get the best copiers under the best value. A lot of discussion on that one, PJ, a lot of discussion on that one. But ultimately, we wound up with a great outcome from that. So, of course, the police department has an entirely new access system now, and it's much more sophisticated, much more engaging, so we know when people are coming in and when they're going, it's not so loose, and most importantly, we got a much more sophisticated way to process our evidence than we did before, so that's important. Okay, before I get to the council, I want to pass out a few cards here and just say thank you to some people. So I will start. And I have a gift for everybody. The gift is the same. It is a nice lunch cooler. It has a city logo on it that actually holds 9 cans of soda, boy, soda. Okay? Yes, no diet soda. So I will start with you, Jody. Thank you for everything.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you. Probably should grab more of these when you come. Okay, here's Laura. I'm really excited about what this new role means to you and what it's going to create for you, so thank you for that. Lindsay, welcome to the city. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Boyd, I've always enjoyed the conversations and the energy level, so thank you.
Thank you.
And PJ, you just have to tell the mayor that this is the best koozie ever. So thank you for everything, PJ.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Okay. You want to see what it looks like, okay, the city council. Definitely robust conversations. Anyone want to disagree with that one? But it's been very engaging. It's been amazing to watch how we're all focused on the best interests of Duvall. And most importantly, we respect each other and occasionally have fun. And I've got a great photo. At the end, I'll show you how we like to have some fun as we do from the council's perspective. So what the next piece for Matthew and for Michelle's perspective is I have a slide on each one of you. And I put together, believe it or not, 3 points that kind of what I think about each of you. For each of you as we go through this. So I'm going to hand out your card as I go. So I'm going to pick, I'm going to start with Amy. We've been friends for many years, Amy. So she definitely works hard for the community, there's no question about that. Have you ever seen her schedule? She puts in more hours sometimes than I do. She's a great partner to debate the issues, and as we joked a week ago about how if you create a Wonderland drink, you actually work out, the debates get more engaging, as her husband would distinguish and say, yes. He would oftentimes just sit there and was to watch it because it was purely from the entertainment perspective. But the biggest thing was I always got a lot of help thinking about things from a different perspective. And the biggest thing is she's been a regional strategist and builder as we go through things. And there's a couple of stories I'll show about how becoming engaged regionally pays off and big dividends as we go. So thank you, Amy. Becky.
Oh my goodness. The old fat picture of me with black hair is gone. I'm gonna hug you.
Yes, we tried as best we could to get a new picture.
You know what I love you.
Yes. She's a steadfast advocate, there's no question about it, that how many people come to visit your insurance agency, probably more than the customers do, to come see you, because you're definitely an advocate for the community. You support key community groups, it's amazing how many times you'd say, hey, wait a minute, we can't forget about this community group or that community group because of what they do for the community. And then has a wealth of knowledge and wisdom from lessons learned from a lot of time working in the city and things that we do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, Michelle. So she's definitely thoughtful and engaging, there's no question about that, because you can see her brain turning as she's working through things. And so, the other thing is, she researches the issues. I don't know how many times she'd call me up and say, well, I just spent 2 hours reading this, and I think we gotta look at something a little bit differently. So it's kind of hard to debate her, because she spends the time researching the issue. And she's also really quiet and soft-spoken, but man, she's got some great ideas and things that she does. And most importantly, she supports her peers. It's amazing to watch her engage and incorporate as much as what she can do with where she's going with stuff. Jason, you're definitely data-driven. It's the most amazing person I've ever seen you do so much research in everything that you do. So I'm impressed with all that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're also very engaged in local and environmental issues. There's no question about it. No matter what group I go to, they know Jason Walker from Farm, Fish, and Flood, and all the other things that he does, the Community Valley Network. You were a big advocate for when Laura Smith says, hey, I'd love to get a donation. I said, well, what does Jason think about it? And Jason loves it. Jason thinks it's a great idea. And so we definitely put some money in the budget to see that happen for her. And of course, you're passionate about Duvall and passionate about the Squamish Valley. And you can see that in the work that you've done, not just for Duvall, but within Petite, within the valley itself. So thank you for that. Okay, Matthew. He brought a lot of experience to the planning commission as he walked into this, because he's got a lot of municipal experience. You're the only person on city council who works for another city, so I'm not sure if that's crazy or good, but we're gonna go with good. And you listen to your peers. It's amazing how sitting next to him, he always wants to, he's about ready to say something, but then he pauses thinking, maybe I'm gonna reflect on what was just said, because he really is wanting to do what's best for the community for sure, no question about that. And he's really thoughtful about his comments and thinks through things, so Matthew, thank you for that. Okay, Scott Thomas is not here, but one of the things that really stood out for me was he's definitely fiscally focused on the budget, supports the business community, and he's passionate about economic development. So Diane, anybody want to debate that she is our resident artist? No question about that, Diane. And she's obviously a very thoughtful team builder. She's constantly working behind the scenes and trying to say, okay, how would this work and how can I make this happen and what can we do? And so some of the best events have ever happened at your place. My personal favorite was the staff Christmas party. I'm sure David didn't appreciate drinking all the great wine that we did in their kitchen. But it was a great team building exercise for the entire staff and more importantly the council. And so that was great to see that. And of course, you're very engaged in the community. I thought a lot of ideas that you had around rocks was just fascinating. I approached that. Okay, well, before I do that, I also brought something for Amy and Jennifer. So, thank you for everything, and I look forward to hearing what happens. As well as a council member, I'm excited about it, so it's good to do that. So, what's next? Call to action, kind of the same three things I bring up every time. But I want to talk about a couple of stories before I go into this piece of it. So, does anybody remember the wastewater treatment plant when we first built it? How much fun that was, and how, yes, of course, this was. So, I wanted to pass this around. This is the actual signed bill that gave us a $4 million grant from the state of Washington. And I remember Becky saying, hey, well, if you want to get some money, you got to go down to Olympia to do it. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just went down and met this guy named Bill Finkbinder, who told me he was a state senator. I said, okay. I said, so what do I need to do, Bill? He goes, well, help me understand the issue. So I spent my entire summer blowing up balloons for his re-election campaign. Not because I was interested in the balloons, I was interested in figuring out what pushed him to do the things that he did. And it was really interesting because the year we were awarded this money, he was the Senate Majority Leader. And there was this little city down south that has a dome called Tacoma that was trying to beat us out for the $4 million. And because we were organized, because we were passionate about what we did, and more importantly, we had shared our message continuously for 2 sessions in Olympia. They gave us a specific line item right out of the college budget for $4 million to Duvall. And no city's ever been able to do it since because, believe it or not, they changed the rules. Because we found a way to make it work. And we hired, believe it or not, the lobbyists, Towers, for $8,000 at the time. And a result of it, we got $4 million. So this is my little thing I keep hanging on my wall because it shows me about being patient and persistence pays off. Okay, so there's going to be a transition in leadership and new council members have become, and then city staff is clearly raising the bar. I saw that today from our deputy city administrator. She's definitely engaged in this. She did chuckle and say, how come all these things come up when Matt goes on vacation? We are recording it for his benefit. So, but it's really neat to see all the things that they're doing to raise the bar, the level of service within public works, new policies and procedures about how we operate as an organization, because we are maturing as a city, we're growing. And obviously new people are coming along. And an asset management system, something the council's talked about for a long time, we're now seeing that come about. And then the big thing is you got a new mayor coming on board. Every department head that exists today was ones I hired. Amy's coming in to pick that up. And so she's doing the best she can in a really exceptional way to engage all these department heads and say, this is a new person doing something different. First time in I don't know how many years is going to be a mayor with office hours. So that's really going to change the approach and engagement that goes on with it. With that, there's collaboration among your peers in the community. There are so many things that go on outside of Duvall that involve Duvall. That, the pen came apart this morning when I put it in the box.
Okay, it's like, I didn't do it.
But I think that's lasted 13 years now. I've had that. So, but there's collaboration among your peers. There's so many different examples of when you step outside of what you do, you can start to realize that you wind up having to be a participant for a number of years before you become a player. So Amy can resonate with this time and time again. I sat on the Sound City Executive Board, but it took me 4 years to get there. I sat on the AWC Trust Health Board, it took me 5 years to get there. So it takes time, it takes energy, and it takes working together as a group to be able to get there to that point. And so I encourage all of you to get out there and engage regionally. Get out there and step out, not just go to an AWC function, but step out and start to see different things. And Amy got to experience her first North End Mayor's meeting, and it's a very eclectic group. And every group you participate in, whether you go to the Sound Cities dinners or SBGA dinners, Jason's been president of, it's a different group, and they all have different things they want to focus on. But when you start to work collaboratively, it's amazing that you can get to show up. You may not get the county executive to show up to Duvall City Council meeting, but you will get him to show up to an SBGA meeting. And so you may not be able to get your time that you want with that individual, but the collective group can certainly do that. I've been to the governor's mansion for breakfast for 3 times now because of South City's engagement. Got to drive right up to the front door. Kind of cool. But the nice thing about it was that there's 13 of us and having sitting breakfast with him, and we get to talk with him about issues that are affecting us. Could the mayor of Duvall ever get him to come to Duvall? No. But collectively we could all get some time with him. And that's the biggest thing that you get out of engaging regionally. So past opportunities will lead to future opportunities. So whether you agree or disagree with who these people are in the room, I had dinner at the White House. So it was really interesting because I met a lot of really fun people, to include the mayor of Honolulu. Okay, so I've got 2 stories to relate to each one as we go through this piece of it. The other one was my friend, sometimes I don't call him my friend because he sucks me into different things, is Matt Larson sucked me into going to Korea. Now Diane, of course, remembers the experiences going to Korea, but the standing joke was they wanted to get a picture of me catching a fish. And the way they do it is they actually release fish in this pond and there's no nets. You have to catch them with your hands. So I tried 3 times and failed. So Agnes, who actually lives in Federal Way, she was my interpreter assigned to me. She was assigned to do all the things I couldn't do. So she caught the fish. So I could take a picture. But what was interesting about it was we created a relationship with somebody halfway around the world that opened our doors to a student exchange program for 2 years. It created opportunities. Created an opportunity for Diane to go back to South Korea and say, wow, what an entirely different world exists out there. And then they came to experience Duvall. So they got to understand a little about what's going on. So Columbia still has a relationship with its city in South Korea. Ours has faded out because that mayor, they term out, believe it or not, in South Korea. We didn't have those existing terms. But it's really interesting to see how things progress. And my favorite story I want to share is because it's, my friend Matthew's got a great opportunity, is that he's going to spend a month in the Winter Olympics because of his relationship with South Korea. He's going to be welcoming dignitaries for a month with he and his wife. That's a really rough job. Going out to dinner, eating cocktails. Maybe let's go see ice skating this afternoon. What do you guys think? Or let's try toboggan runs. I mean, these VIP passes to all of it because of his relationship 10 years ago with some guy named Director Moon. And now it's transposed into this thing that goes on and what it does. And what was interesting about when I went to DC with the U.S. Conference of Mayors was I was sitting around a table with the mayors of New York, Philadelphia, Denver, San Francisco, and LA, and Honolulu. And they asked me how big Duvall was. I said a little smaller than New York. And I said we all had to share a story of things we were working on. And so I started to share about how we were having some struggles with our financing from federal money for Main Street. And so the mayor of Philadelphia grabbed me by my arm, dragged me down the hall to the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Fox, and said, fix the problem. When I came back, the money was there. And the state called me up and said, how'd you do it? I said, I don't know. It was interesting because when I went to go see the mayor of Honolulu 2 years later, because he said, hey, keep in touch. I did. He said I would spend an entire afternoon with my family. And it's funny, the same things we're running into, the things he's running into, a city of 500,000 people. Right on, it's the capital of Hawaii, is Honolulu. And so it's amazing to see how that city has got similar issues that we're dealing with and what we do. So my advice to the council, you've got 2 new council members, so it's a great opportunity to learn. It's okay. Engage. It's a marathon, it's not a race, okay? It took me 4 years just to figure out how to be a decent council member. It took me 8 years to come out to become a really effective mayor. So it takes time to see what you want to do. Get to know each other, invest in each other's projects. My suggestion is, Amy, come up one day to the city of Marysville and see what Matthew does for a living. Matthew, why don't you spend one day with what Michelle does? Just spend an afternoon, maybe an hour or two, and say, okay, what do you do? What keeps you up at night? And think about that. Because when you engage the group, you start to engage them regionally. One of my favorite stories about changing the minds of King County with its growth boundary line, if Jason remembers this story, was when Ray says, hey, I would love my property to be part of Duvall. Well, the county says, we're never going to change the growth boundary line. When 7 council members and the mayor are sitting in a room with the county downstairs in this building and said we want to do it, they did.